Yo. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? We are burning the midnight oil here at the Fantasy Headliners because we got to get out information on the 2022 NFL season schedule just released earlier this evening. We've been taking a look, dissecting it a little bit, going through, putting together some super sexy graphics for you all. And tonight we are going to talk a little bit about, I say tonight, we're probably going to drop this video tomorrow morning, but whatever, doesn't matter. But we're going to talk a little bit about the schedule, some fantasy football implications, some regular implications for what the schedule looks like, some tough matchups, things of that nature. And then in a couple of days, you're actually going to be able to catch our prediction. So we'll actually put that out after we have a chance to really sit down and dive into it. But for now, just wanted to talk over the season schedule, maybe what you can expect from it and what that means for fantasy football or just your favorite team. So hit that like button for me, and we're going to jump right into the video because there's going to be a ton of information in this one. Bye weeks. First off, bye weeks. Week 6, we got the Lions, the Texans, the Titans, and the Raiders in week 6. They get the early bye this season. Week 7 is going to be the Bills, the Eagles, the Vikings, and the Rams. Week 8, the Chiefs and the Chargers. Week 9, we're going to have the Browns, the Cowboys, the Broncos, the 49ers, the Steelers, and the Giants. That is going to be our biggest bye week of the offseason, or of the season, with the exception of week 14, which will match it with just that many. But if you look right there in terms of guys that you're going to be missing, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, Elijah Mitchell, Najee Harris, Saquon Barkley. Week 9 is going to be a big one for running backs. You're going to be missing a lot of really good players there. You're going to be missing Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, depending on how the wide receiver situation goes out with today's Jerry Jeudy news, but Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Deontay Johnson. It's just, there's a whole lot of guys in week 9 that we could potentially be missing. You know, week 10 also brings some potential tough ones there as well, with the Ravens, with Lamar Jackson, Joey B, and those two offenses. Heading into week 11, we're going to be missing the Jags, the Bucks, the Seahawks, and the Dolphins. And week 12, there will be no buys, so we'll get a little bit of a break from the buys there. In week 13, then we'll go with the Cardinals and the Panthers. And then again, week 14 is going to be a tough one, because depending on how you have certain things set up on your team, certain things set up in your league, you might actually be having bye weeks in the first week of your fantasy football playoffs. For the Falcons, Drake London obviously could be missing there. Fortunate Cordero Patterson. There's not going to be a whole lot missing from the Falcons. The Bears, David Montgomery, Justin Fields potentially, Darnell Mooney. For the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, whatever wide receiver becomes the wide receiver one there. For the Colts, Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor will be a big one. So JT owners, those of you that will be drafting him number 1 overall, just remember you might be missing him week 14, the first week of the fantasy football playoffs. So just keep that in mind as you go through your season. You're going to want to have some good support to help you out there, or just get a bye. Well, which you probably will if you listen to us here. Just kidding. But not really. For the Commanders, you're going to be missing Antonio Gibson. You're going to be missing Terry McLaurin. And for the Saints, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara. So week 14 is going to be another big one to keep in mind as well as you go throughout the season, knowing that you're going to have to be planning for that. International games. Not only do we have 5 international games, but we have 5 international games in 3 different areas this year. In London, we've got the Vikings and the Saints matching up in week 4, Giants and Packers in week 5, Broncos and Jaguars in week 8. In Germany, we're going to have the Seahawks and Bucks playing in week 10. This will be the first time ever that the NFL plays in Germany. And then in week 11 in Mexico, we're going to have the 49ers and the Cardinals. Whew. Lots of international games this year. And I know for you fantasy football advocates out there, you fans of fantasy football, international games aren't always the best games. Now, the good news is for Mexico, it's going to be on the same time as us here. So it's really not going to throw off their schedules too much. But for London and Germany, you're going to be putting yourself in a situation where you're going to have different time zones by quite a bit there. Primetime games here, it might be a little bit small on your screen, but I wanted to just list all the primetime games. The Detroit Lions, no primetime games this year. And I believe if I read correctly, the Buffalo Bills will lead the way with the most primetime games this year. And they're going to kick things off Thursday night football, Bills and Rams. So that's going to be a great matchup there. Then Sunday night football is going to be the Broncos and the Cowboys, and Monday night is going to be the Broncos and the Seahawks, or excuse me, Buccaneers and Cowboys, Broncos and Seahawks. And you can just see everything that goes through there with the primetime games. Again, Detroit's not going to have any primetime games this year, and it sounds like the Bills are going to be leading the way with the most primetime games. So definitely some good ones there to keep an eye on later in the season. I mean, Rams, Chargers, Week 17, playoff spots on the line. Yes, please. Bengals and Bills on Sunday Night Football, Week 17. Playoff spots on the line. Yes, please. Get it. Inject it into my veins right now. Let's go ahead and jump into the NFC West, though, and take a look at their schedule and what they are going to be looking like this year. In terms of difficulty, some of the early kind of projections out there that people have been throwing out, and again, I've just kind of surfed a few different areas, a few different people to see kind of what some thoughts are on this. We'll be diving in and doing our own breakdowns and our own projections coming up here very soon, but kind of just some thoughts from other people at this point. It does appear that when you take a look at the conference here for the NFC West, that you're going to have a couple of teams that are going to be really right in the middle. San Francisco is going to kind of be in the middle. Arizona is going to be kind of right in the middle, along with the Rams. The Rams are actually going to have one of the probably tougher schedules in football coming off a Super Bowl victory. Makes sense. And then the Seattle Seahawks, they're kind of in a rebuilding mode or a reshaping mode a little bit right now. They're also going to have a little bit more of a tougher schedule. So when you take a look at what we've got here, I mean, for the Rams, quick to pinpoint here, for the Rams, they do have stretch here, week 5 through 8, where they get 3 home games in a bye week. So they get to stay in LA, they get to stay comfy, but it's going to come back a little bit later in the later in the season, because then they're going to have a tough matchup potentially at home with the Oakland Raiders, but then they're going to have to go to Green Bay, come back home to Denver, and then go to Los Angeles to face the Chargers, and then to Seattle to face the Seahawks. So that could be a little bit of a difficult stretch for them. Kind of the same thing for the Arizona Cardinals. They're going to have to go to Denver, then they'll be home against Tampa Bay, and then they got to go to Atlanta, and then they got to go to Seattle. So those late season games there where playoffs potentially on the line, I think you would rather be playing at home and have your fans behind you, and instead they're going to have to head out. Now, the good thing for the Cardinals, their bye is in week 13, so they really get a really nice chance to rest, get everybody healthy, and then they get an opportunity to go out on the road after that. So that does help that situation for the Arizona Cardinals a little bit. Let's head on over to, and don't forget here, obviously we've got them pinpointed here. Arizona and San Francisco are going to be playing in Mexico City again in week 11. And then the Seattle Seahawks and the Buccaneers in week 10 will be in Germany. Let's head down south to the NFC South and take a look at what we could see coming out of this conference here. For the Carolina Panthers, they're going to have a tough-ish start to the season with some of these teams, especially when you take a look. Cleveland, winnable game. New York, winnable game. New Orleans, winnable game. But then, holy cow, you've got to play Arizona at home. You've got to play San Francisco at home. You've got to go to the Los Angeles Rams, and then you got to come back home and play Tampa Bay. So if Carolina does not get off to a good start in those first 3 games, they'll realistically could be several games under 500 to start the season very, very quickly. They are going to have to be ready to roll, because that is going to be a tough test for them. The Buccaneers are going to be on the road 2 straight games to start the season, and 4 of their 4 of their first 7 games are going to be on the road as well. And then they're also in that time frame. So just listen before the bye. Before the bye, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're going to be on the road for 2, then they get to come home for 3. On the road for 2, then they get to come back home for 2, but then they have to go to Germany and then they get the bye. So several road games to start the season, and they're going to have to also go to Germany as well. So that's kind of going to be a tough start to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers season. We'll see how that plays out as they roll all the way through. This is going to be a division that really should be Tampa Bay's. At one point in time before Brady came back, this looked like a division that was going to be up in the air, but they should really solidify themselves at the top this year and really winning that division. I don't want to say easily, but it's probably not going to be nearly as difficult as what it was once was before we found out that Brady was coming back. Heading out east for the NFC East here. We got a London game coming up here. Green Bay and New York in week 5 out there in London. So they're going to go with that right there. The New York Giants, yes, they have to go on the road to face Tennessee, last year's #1 overall seed. But after that, they get to come home, they get to come home for a decent stretch. They get Carolina, Dallas, Chicago, all potentially winnable games. They do have to go to London, but then they get to come back home as well to face the Baltimore Ravens. Now, down the stretch, if they find themselves in the playoff hunt at all, which I don't expect them to, Washington, Minnesota, and Philadelphia are all going to be on the road to finish the season there with only a home game against the Indianapolis Colts. The Washington football team, when you take a look at what they're going to be bringing in this year, Washington probably has, as of right now, one of the easier schedules. In football. When you take a look at the teams they have to face, Jacksonville and Detroit right off the bat to start the year, a couple of winnable games for them. They're going to have Chicago in there. They're going to have Houston. They're going to have the Atlanta Falcons in there as well. And then, again, a couple of winnable games potentially to end the year, too. So especially in those divisional races, if Washington finds themselves heading into week 18 with a chance to walk away, all of these teams are going to be playing each other in week 18. This is going to probably be a division that's going to be very close. So whatever team wins this is probably going to be a team that does have the ability to kind of separate themselves a little bit early and hold that lead throughout the season. Heading into the NFC North. The NFC North is looking at a decent schedule this year with Chicago, the Packers, and the Lions and the Vikings all being schedules that could be considered towards the top third of easier schedules in the NFL this year. All 3 teams get to start at home, or 3 of the 4 teams get to start at home, while Green Bay will start in Minnesota. The Lions will have a date with the Philadelphia Eagles to get things started. Taking a look at some of these schedules, with the Lions here. Yeah, you've got the Eagles and you've got the Commanders to kind of start things off. Both of those games, I mean, really, honestly, if you take a look at it, weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4, if they play decent football, those are all games that they should be in. Trying to go to New England is going to be tough, and then they have a really early bye, which can be tough for teams a little bit later on the season, especially when you look at their season where they have to end on the road in New York, in Carolina, at home against Chicago, and then in Green Bay. The Minnesota Vikings, they're going to find themselves in a tough spot if they want to finish, towards the top. If we get to the end of the season and we look at the Minnesota Vikings as being a team that, we have a shot to go to the playoffs, they're going to have to go to Green Bay and go to Chicago. So realistically, what Minnesota is going to want to do earlier in the season, they're going to want to win those matchups at home earlier in the season. For the Chicago Bears, they're going to have kind of a tough route here to the playoffs as well when we get to the end of the season. Because once you get past the New York Jets, you're going to have Green Bay, you're going to have a bye, but then you have Philly, Buffalo, Detroit, and Minnesota. Detroit being on the road for Chicago. And then for Green Bay, they kind of have themselves in the best position, honestly. Yes, a tough game at home against the Rams, but then week 16, 17, and 18, they have to go to Miami, a winnable game for them. And then they get the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions at home at back-to-back weeks. So if we see them towards the end of the season being in the playoff hunt, those are going to be some games that they are going to absolutely have to win to get in. Green Bay schedule, a couple of games that you see there, in week 7 and 8, the Commanders in week 7 against Green Bay. That game is going to be on the road. They know they're going to have to go to Buffalo the week after. That could be a little bit of a letdown week where maybe Green Bay is kind of looking past the Commanders because they know they got one of the top AFC teams that they have to go see the week after. That could be, one of those letdown games that unfortunately the Packers could end up losing. For the AFC South this year, and what they have, the AFC South, it's going to be a little bit more on the difficult side for Tennessee, obviously being the number 1 overall seed last year. Their schedule is going to be a little bit more difficult. Indianapolis and Houston towards the top, and then Jacksonville towards the top when you look at easiest schedules. But those are just based on some really early numbers, taking a look at what these guys have. We'll break it down ourselves here and then kind of tell you what our thoughts are. For Tennessee, their path to repeating is going to be tough to start the year because they're going to have the Giants at home, which is a winnable game, but then they got to go to Buffalo. They've got Oakland coming to them. They're going to have to face Indianapolis, and then coming out of the bye, Indianapolis and Houston. But here's going to be the biggest stretch of games for Tennessee this year. This will be the most important stretch. After they go to Houston, they've got to go to Kansas City. They get Denver at home. They got to go to Green Bay. They get the Bengals at home, and then they got to go to Philadelphia. Those are going to be some tough games right there. And if they can do that, then they put themselves in a position with Houston, Dallas, and the Jaguars back to back to back to end the season to kind of close things out. But if they come out of that stretch right there, with some losses, if Indianapolis gets their stuff together this year, they could be looking at Indianapolis when that is done, because during that same time frame, Indianapolis is going to have some tough games as well. They're going to have to go to New England, go to Oakland. They're going to have Philadelphia at home, and then they're going to have the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. So that's also going to be a tough stretch of games for them as well. Houston and Jacksonville probably not quite at a point yet where they're going to make a run. But that would be the point. Like if either of these teams were in the thick of things come that week 9 area, that's going to be the time to take advantage. But Jacksonville, probably not going to happen. They've got Oakland, Kansas City, a bye, and then Baltimore. Houston, though, they have a little bit more of a shot. They're going to have the Eagles, the Giants, the Commanders, Miami, and then the Browns after that. For the AFC East, we've got the Buffalo Bills, potential reigning champions of the AFC. We'll see. I'm trying to help Chouse out. Okay, I'm trying to help Chouse out a little bit, and it's not really working. But that's okay. We'll take care of them. For the Buffalo Bills, it's going to be a tough schedule. It's not going to be the easiest schedule, right? It's going to be one of the tougher schedules. They're kind of towards the back third-ish right now. And everybody around them has gotten better. So for Buffalo, for them, really the key is going to be win all of the matchups that you should win and try your best to at least split with everybody in your division. You do that, we should be solid. Now, to end the season, not bad. When we get to about week 10, winnable game against Minnesota, winnable game against the Browns, winnable game against Detroit, tough matchup potentially on the road in New England, winnable game against the Jets, winnable game against the Miami Dolphins, winnable game against Chicago, but then you got the Bengals and you've got the Patriots to end the final 2 weeks. So if you don't get that first round bye, you're looking at facing 2 of the tougher teams and then having to go into that first round gauntlet of what this conference is going to look like. Miami and the Jets, both of these teams are trending up. But for me, really for Miami, it's going to be all about how they start the season. Because when you look at the schedule, they could really start the season 0-4. And yes, last year they went from being completely out of it to back in it to out of it again. But if you start 0-4, that's going to cause some problems for you. You've got New England, Baltimore, the Bills, and the Bengals right there to start the year. And then as you see, when we get towards kind of the back half of the season, they're going to have to face, when we get towards the end of the year, they're going to have to face the Chargers, the Bills, the Packers, and the Patriots. That's going to be a tough end and start to the season there. 100%. So if Miami has playoff aspirations this year, they're going to have to get off to a good start, at least 2-2 to begin the season. At least 2-2 to begin the season. For the New York Jets, their schedule's a little bit more staggered for me in terms of not having so many tough contests back to back to back to back. So for the Jets, they need to stay within themselves, and they just need to stay consistent. The AFC North. This was considered one of the tougher divisions in football. Maybe not so much anymore, as the Bengals might be the clear leaders. And if you're a fan of any of the other three teams there, you might disagree with me. But, the Bengals getting back to the playoffs, it's going to be tough. Now, to start the year, definitely things look a little bit better to start the year. Tough game at home against Pittsburgh, potentially. You got winnable games on the road against Dallas and the Jets. You get Miami at home. You got to go to Baltimore, New Orleans. And then you get the Falcons, you get the Browns, and you get the Panthers. So really that first half of the schedule there, when you take a look at it, that's not an easy schedule. I don't want to say that, but it is a winnable schedule. Then they go to their bye. But then when they come out of the bye, they got to go to Pittsburgh. They got to go to Tennessee. They get Kansas City at home. They get the Browns at home. But then they get Tampa Bay on the road, the Patriots on the road, the Bills at home, and the Ravens at home. As good as this schedule could start for the Bengals, they're going to have to start well, because when you get to the back half here, if you call yourself a 500 team here, that is going to be tough and such a really good. If you're over 500, well over 500 going into the bye, you skate through the rest of the season 500-ish or a couple games over, you should lock up the AFC North. But if you don't win winnable games to start the year, Cincinnati could be in trouble towards the end of the season. I don't really see it happening. But the gauntlet that is the AFC West, what is considered to be one of, if not the toughest conferences in football, in my opinion, the toughest conference in football. These teams are going to absolutely beat up on each other all season long. Now, who has the best start to the season? Who has the best start to the season? When you take a look at what we have here, you got to say probably Denver. Denver or the Chargers are going to have the best start to the season. The Chargers are going to have to face Las Vegas and Kansas City, but then they get the Jaguars, the Texans, and the Browns back to back to back. Not bad at all there for the Chargers. Chargers have a great opportunity to get off to a fast start. Kansas City is going to have some tougher matchups. I mean, they're going to get Arizona, the Chargers, then they're going to get Indianapolis, but then they've got to go up against Tampa Bay on the road, and then they're going to have tough home games against Oakland and the Buffalo Bills before headed to San Francisco before their bye. And then for the Denver Broncos, again, taking a look at it, you're going to have Seattle. That's a winnable game on the road. A winnable game against the Houston Texans. That could make you 2-0. Tough game against San Francisco. Then you've got to go on the road to the Raiders. You got to face the Colts. You got to face the Chargers on the road. The good thing is you got a London game right before your bye going up against the Jags. That's always going to be good, but potential tough finishes for a few of these teams. Kansas City could end up having the best finish to the season. If the Broncos don't turn out to be as good as we had hoped this year, then you've got two matchups against them, the Texans and the Seahawks. Texans and Seahawks, both teams that are going to be on the downside potentially this year. The Raiders, a little bit of a tougher. They're going to have the Chargers, the Rams, the Patriots, the Steelers, the 49ers, and the Chiefs to end the season. The Raiders are the team that are going to have to start hot because they have probably the toughest end of the season. And then for the Chargers, I mean, yes, this is going to be a tough end of the season. Coming out of that Atlanta game in Week 9, you got to go to San Francisco. You're going to have Kansas City. You got to go to Arizona and then to Las Vegas. My bad. Opening up some deep wounds there, Raiders fans. Apologize. And then you got Miami, Tennessee, Indianapolis, LA, and then you've got the Denver Broncos. So the Bolts are going to have to get off to a really, really good start as well if they're going to want to stay in it come the end of the season. But ladies and gentlemen, hey, I just wanted to break down I do like a semi breakdown of the roster right now, just in case you hadn't had a chance to really dive into it for your favorite team, or you wanted to talk a little bit about fantasy football implications and things of that nature, and what it means for your favorite teams past to the playoffs and stuff like that. Don't forget, we do break down like the best stretch of schedules, the worst stretch of schedules for every position in our draft guide. Pre-order it right now. You can do that, fantasyheadliners.com. That link is down below. But that's a great section of the draft guide. And then we're also going to be doing our predictions here in a few days. So then you all will kind of see where we stand on certain teams this year. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get out of here. Hopefully you all stay safe and healthy. Have a great rest of your day. And I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on third down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that chub life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation.
I'm a headliner.